Amigazos.
Let's call in the guards.
Today I'm going to talk about Episode 3 of the Star Wars Skeleton Crew series, one that has plenty of interesting things to discuss. This episode, titled Navigation Problems, is very intriguing because it presents a mystery that different factions want to solve. I watched a few videos where people were mocking how easily the kids in Jod Na Nawood escaped from Borgo Port. But let's remember, this place is like Tortuga, filled with pirates who are too caught up with spices, drinking, and fighting. Nobody cares about a group of kids leaving. What really bothers them is that the person they know as Captain Silvo has escaped. Essentially, we're going to divide this video into 3 main parts. The first will be a recap of the events that I think are relevant to the story. Then, a little Easter egg hunt. And finally, the theory section about what I think could happen in this series. Everything in that last part is just speculation on my part. So it's possible that I'm right about some things and wrong about many others. However, this video will include references to both the first 2 episodes and this third one. So, if you haven't seen anything from this series yet, I recommend watching the episodes first before watching this video. This is your spoiler warning.
What is that?
What a marvel. After 4 years of people mentioning Skeleton Crew with Jude Law in YouTube videos, and always using the same frame of this character, being questioned by a couple of gatekeeper droids, with some mysterious kids in the background, we finally see that scene. Now we have this character who has multiple identities. The main one seems to be Jod Na Nawood, played by Jude Law. Particularly in this scene, I find it interesting that these gatekeeper droids, which we've also seen in The Mandalorian, originally appeared in Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, at Jabba the Hutt's palace. These droids, which look like a mix of microphones and eyes, serve as gatekeepers. Jude Law plays a multifaceted character who, at least up to this point in the first 3 episodes, has 3 identities. The New Republic knows him as the criminal Crimson Jack. To the kids, he introduces himself as Jod Na Nawood, a supposed Jedi, although he never confirms it. And he's also mentioned as the former Captain Silvo, the one we saw in the opening scene of the first episode, where he faced a mutiny. I think the multiplicity of identities creates an intentional ambiguity because it keeps the audience intrigued about his true nature and past. Is he good? Is he bad? Will he betray the kids or not? Throughout this episode, there's an atmosphere that feels a lot like Peter Pan. This is evident because the director is David Lowery, who recently worked on a new live-action adaptation for Disney, Peter Pan, and Wendy. That movie didn't do well, but in it, Jude Law also played Captain Hook, and this thematic echo arises because the phrase, "the lost children," is explicitly mentioned.
The truth. The truth. I'm just like you, okay? I'm lost. I'm alone.
These are the kids who left their home planet, at Aten, and now don't know how to get back. But Jude Law's character also describes himself as lost, as someone who doesn't know where to go. So, I think James M. Barrie's narrative is a strong source of inspiration for this content. I particularly believe that Jude Law is the kind of actor you bring into a project when you need complex characters. Recently, we saw this in his portrayal of Yanrog in Captain Marvel, where he plays a mentor with ambiguous intentions. One of my personal favorites, and very fitting for the season, is his character Graham in The Holiday, a charming and vulnerable role. His portrayal of Dr. Watson in Sherlock Holmes is another great example. Jude Law has an incredible arsenal of acting skills that allow him to create layers of morality and craft a mysterious aura around his characters. Jod Na Nawood is not going to be just another rogue. He's going to have depth. Trust me. Narratively, this story is already building a fascinating dynamic with multiple factions. On one side, we have the kids who want to return home. We follow them closely, although at times it feels like their mission gets a bit sidelined. I don't see this as a narrative flaw, but rather an effort to engage a broader, older audience. Wim, for example, seems thrilled by these adventures, while the others are more concerned. But they are one faction. Another faction is Jod Na Nawood himself, who seeks the famed treasure of Aten. On that planet, there are clearly 2 more factions, the parents desperate to retrieve their children, and the enigmatic supervisor we'll discuss later. Between these groups are the pirates, who will attempt to recapture Captain Silvo, as they know him, and the bounty hunters the pirates might hire to chase the kids, and Jod Na Nawood, each with their own interests and morality. If all this weren't enough, the New Republic is stepping in, having learned that Crimson Jack, as they know him, is at large and has kidnapped several children. This clash of factions and objectives is about to get really interesting. Now, moving on to Easter eggs. There are fascinating references worth diving into. For instance, the phrase "the loot of 1,000 worlds" seems taken straight from Treasure Planet.
The loot of 1,000 worlds.
Treasure Planet.
Referring to the place where the treasure was hidden in that adaptation of Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. This phrase is mentioned by a new character named Kahim, a delightful hybrid of owl and griffin, full of wisdom. Kim serves as an oracle, a cartographer, and a scholar.
Yes, my growing collection of trinkets and tokens from 1,000 different worlds.
There's 1,000 worlds?
To me, she felt reminiscent of Wan Shi Tong, the giant owl spirit from Avatar, the last airbender, in the episode The Library. Kim is portrayed by Aaliyah Shawkat, known for her work in Arrested Development. A debate that arises here, which I found very interesting and won't delve into too much right now since it ties into a theory, is whether the kids believe Jod Na Nawood is a Jedi or not. In fact, it's not just about whether he's a Jedi, but whether he truly uses the Force, or is simply tricking them with magnets or similar devices. This idea has been explored in other series, and I found it fascinating because, for these kids, in their idiosyncrasy and how they've been raised, Jedi are figures of legend, almost myths. They have no real contact with the Jedi Order, its philosophy, or its culture. So, it makes sense that they'd either find it very easy to believe he could be a Jedi, or, in the case of the girls, find it completely impossible. KB, one of the kids, even runs calculations like C3PO to argue that this companion can't be a Jedi. But I think that from the moment he used the Force, and we heard the theme played on a cello, along with the sound design suggesting a mystical energy field, it became clear that he is a Force user. However, this doesn't automatically make him a Jedi, but the debate is incredibly engaging. I think there's an obvious reference. At Aten could be seen as a sort of Fort Knox in space. Fort Knox is a military location in the United States that, among other things, contains a completely isolated and highly secure gold vault. Historically, it was associated with the gold standard when national economies were backed by gold reserves. Of course, I'm oversimplifying a very complex concept, but essentially this vault symbolized the foundation of a country's economy. In one of the Die Hard movies, I think the third one, there's a heist in a Federal Reserve full of gold bars. Aten seems to draw a similar reference, but I believe that beyond holding gold in the form of Republic credits, the great work referenced in this episode is tied to a system of algorithmic and cryptographic analysis, a foundation for cataloging resources throughout the known universe. It's a place where there was clearly critical financial information supporting the economy of the old Republic.
Money.
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 I'm going to say money.
Its disappearance doesn't seem to be a coincidence. This might also explain why children from this world grow up to become analysts or statisticians, as mentioned in previous episodes. There's an interesting reference to a novel by Isaac Asimov called Foundation. In this novel, a secret organization is dedicated to preserving knowledge and guiding the future. I believe Aten is more connected to this: knowledge, algorithms, and preserving the future. Now, during the confrontation between Jod Na Nawood and SM-33, a couple of intertextual details caught my attention. First, when SM-33 fully rises, it reminded me a lot of Griff Tannen facing Marty McFly in the 80s cafe scene in Back to the Future Part 2. On the other hand, SM-33 repeatedly gives the same programmed response when asked about At-Atin,
Can't say I remember no At-Atin.
claiming not to have that information. However, I think that at some point, SM-33 did have that information, but lost part of its memory banks. This connects to the fact that SM-33 is missing an eye. Perhaps, if it recovers that missing piece, it could regain its memories. This reminds me a lot of the droid Ben from Treasure Planet, who also had parts of his memory banks removed, which held the key to finding the treasure planet. I don't think this is a coincidence.
Name is... Ben! Of course I'm Ben! The bioelectronic navigator. Sorry, my memory isn't what it used to be. I lost my mind. I've lost my mind. You haven't found it, have you? My missing piece? My primary memory circuit?
I think it's becoming increasingly evident that the great work could be connected to Palpatine's resurrection and all the resources required to make that happen, to the point where At-Atin might have ties to Exegol, the rise of the First Order, or even the creation of the Final Order's fleet. I hope that's not the case. Hopefully it's just someone being overly clever, but there's a strong possibility that everything happening here, much like in the Bad Batch, is being constructed to fill in the narrative gaps of the third trilogy. Hopefully that's not the case. For now, though, it's keeping us quite entertained with the visual eloquence of this episode.
Yes.
Featuring scenes that evoke the style of 80s cinema. For example, there's a shot that reminded me of the covers of The Lord of the Rings novels I read as a child. A group of characters walking against a backdrop of sky, particularly with a large moon and their figures in chiaroscuro. I think it's fascinating how they portray this story, with a clever use of the volume and visual effects. However, the practical effects also stand out. For instance, there's the character Neil, the Ortolan kid, which was quite a challenge to bring to the screen. This character combines several elements. First, the performance of the child actor providing the voice, recording multiple takes without any special equipment. Then, the scene was recreated with the actor inside the suit and wearing an animatronic head. On top of that, this was complemented by the work of puppeteers who operated the character's expressions using remote-controlled devices. It's likely there was some enhancement in post-production, but it's a very interesting visual achievement with excellent work from Legacy, who helped create the suit, along with the child actor's performance. Something similar happens with SM-33, which is a puppet that physically exists, making it much easier for the child actors to interact with the character. Nick Frost, of course, is fantastic in this role with his voice performance, and he was also present on set to help the children further immerse themselves in the realism of the character. Now, moving into the theory section, this whole idea of the supervisor reminds me a lot of Operation Cinder, a contingency plan by Palpatine in case he died or the rebels won the war. I think the supervisor could be one of these entities tied to Palpatine giving orders. However, who knows how long this world has been isolated? It could be an entirely different character. I keep thinking about the movie The Giver. It's not exactly the same situation, but that utopian setting where society is so strictly organized and individuals' possibilities are so limited feels somewhat similar. Definitely, the great work is going to reveal something significant, perhaps akin to The Handmaid's Tale or a similar concept. I believe Jod Na Nawood will have a redemption arc in the vein of the Mandalorian. He's going to end up taking care of these kids. There's a very touching scene in this episode where he cooks for them, eats first, but then leaves plenty of food for all of them and makes sure they sleep well. Little by little, he's becoming the father figure for these kids in some way. I think his heart is going to soften. It's no coincidence that Jod Na Nawood reminds us of characters like Han Solo, Jack Sparrow, or even Hondo Ohnaka, who appears multiple times in the Clone Wars and Rebels. He particularly reminds me of Hondo's relationship with Ezra Bridger. He's a pirate with a heart of gold who eventually sides with the kids. Similarly, he's akin to the cyborg version of Long John Silver in Treasure Planet, who initially has questionable intentions, but ultimately does what's best for Jim Hawkins. Corso, the mercenary from Titan AE, also comes to mind. He acts as an ambiguous mentor, teaching the protagonist Kale many things, but with his own interests in mind. Yet, in the end, he does the right thing. This is Disney, so I think that will be Jod Na Nawood's fate. Furthermore, this brewing rivalry with SM33 seems to be setting up a pivotal decision, whether he sides with the kids or continues chasing the treasure. There's a very interesting parallel between the Black Pearl and the Onyx Cinder. The Onyx Cinder is a weathered ship that has endured numerous battles and adventures, reflecting the wear and tear of its crew, along with a story of mystery, legends, and even this ship was buried for a long time on At-Atin, perhaps 70 or 100 years, who knows. For the kids, it represents a symbol of freedom, much like the Black Pearl does for Jack Sparrow in Pirates of the Caribbean. In this episode, there's a term introduced that will likely be explored throughout the series: the Jewels of the Old Republic. Supposedly, there were 9, and only one, At-Atin, has survived. There are some interesting parallels with this concept. The most immediate is the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The number 9 also recalls the 9 rings of power, given to those who would become the Nazgul in The Lord of the Rings. Additionally, returning to Isaac Asimov's Foundation, that story includes sanctuaries, with a similar significance to these jewels of the Old Republic. The same applies to the Sankara stones from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. These jewels symbolize unity, legacy, and above all, knowledge. In conclusion, I think this series is going very well. It's entertaining content with humor, mystery, and enough charm to keep us engaged. We still have 5 weeks left to continue enjoying this series. I realized how much I'm enjoying it last Monday when, at 8 p.m., I was already ready with popcorn to watch the episode, only to realize it wouldn't air until Tuesday. My confusion stemmed from the fact that the previous week, the premiere had been moved up to Monday, December 3rd. However, starting this week, and for the remaining 4, the episodes will premiere on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. So stay tuned and don't let it happen to you like it did to me. By mid-January, we'll finish the series.
Yo soy Dani Vaques y nos estamos viendo.